Behind the wheel of a beaten-up taxi, he looked like any other Tel Aviv driver. Worn seat covers, cracked dashboard, radio playing softly in Hebrew. But when three men got in and started speaking in Arabic about the operation, 15 years of civilian life suddenly ended. Welcome to Nishim Stories. Before we begin this thrilling story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, hit that subscribe button. David Rosen. That's what it said on the taxi license. For 15 years, he had been driving the same yellow cab through the streets of Tel Aviv, from Herzliya to Ben Gurion Airport, from Jaffa to Ramat Gan. Same routes every day, same traffic, same silence. He looked 45, but his eyes were older. His hair had grayed, his hands gripped the steering wheel with strength but fatigue. Passengers never looked at him twice, just an ordinary driver trying to make a living. His taxi was old but clean. The back seats were worn but not torn. The radio was always on, Hebrew news playing softly. On the dashboard, a small Israeli flag and an old photo of his family, his wife and daughter. He had lost them in a traffic accident 10 years ago. Customers usually wanted to talk. David only answered when necessary. Where to? And 40 shekels. That was it. Sometimes in English, sometimes in Hebrew, rarely in Arabic. He knew the languages but didn't let it show. Every morning he started work at 6 o'clock sharp. He would check his taxi, fill up with gas, begin his daily routine. But the real routine was something else. Observing. Every street, every building, every suspicious movement. His old habits hadn't died, they had just been hidden. His shift lasted until 6 in the evening. Then, home to his single-person apartment, eating canned food and watching television. He pretended the news didn't interest him, but he listened to every word. Security situation, border incidents, terror warnings, old habit, the same routine for 15 years. No problems, no incidents. David Rosen was a perfect ordinary citizen, but this was just a mask. At night, sitting alone in his home, David would sometimes look in the mirror. The lines on his face, traces of old wounds, the fatigue in his eyes. The soul of the man who had died 15 years ago was still there. Major Avi Goldstein. This name had died when he was 35 years old. He had served 15 years in Sayeret Matkal, Israel's most elite unit, a chosen few, impossible missions, operations no one knew about. He had served in the Lebanon wars, Gaza operations, covert missions in the West Bank, hostage rescue, counterterrorism, deep infiltration operations, wars he never recorded, heroics he never spoke of. The death of his family had changed everything, Sarah and little Noah. A drunk driver had taken them away in an instant. Avi had died a second time that day, the first in war, the second in a hospital corridor. After leaving the army, he had completely erased his identity. He legally took the name David Rosen, buried his past, started living as a ghost. But the soul never dies. Every night, before sleep, he would look at old photos, teammates, operations, medals. Then he would put them in the drawer and put on the David Rosen mask again. His neighbors knew him as polite but distant. He would greet them but not chat. He did his grocery shopping in the early hours, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. A perfect ghost life. Wednesday started differently than usual. In the early morning, while David was checking his taxi as always, an urgent message came to his phone. The taxi company was reporting a special customer order. Rosen, VIP transfer from Ben Gurion Airport, Terminal 3, Gate 21. Customer specifically requested you. David frowned. In 15 years, he had never received a special request. Who could want him? But he didn't question it. He started the engine and headed to the airport. On the way, he began to think. A special request usually meant two things. Either a very rich person wanted special service, or there was something else. David's paranoia had kicked in again after 15 years. Ben Gurion Airport was one of Israel's most secure places. Mossad, Shin Bet, military security everywhere. As David went there, his old reflexes began to return. Environmental scanning, alternative routes, escape plans. When he arrived at Terminal 3, three men were waiting, in their 30s, well-dressed, with suitcases. They looked Middle Eastern, but it wasn't certain. David stopped the car and opened the trunk. David Rosen? One of them asked in English with a slight accent. Yes, that's me. The men looked at each other. They seemed satisfied with something. Perfect. You were specially recommended to us. David felt alarm bells ringing inside. Who had recommended him, and why? Before the men got in the back, David had carefully examined them. Their clothes were expensive but new, as if specially purchased. Their shoes were clean, but there was military order in their walk. Their suitcases were heavy, but metal sounds came from inside. "Where are we going?" David asked. "Rothschild Boulevard, number 45, said the first man. David knew the address. It was an area with business centers, offices, conference halls, a place he often took customers. The first 15 minutes were quiet. The men looked tired, jet lag effect. David was observing them through the rearview mirror. One was constantly looking at his phone. Another was examining papers he took from his bag. The third was looking out the window, but actually counting buildings, security cameras, police cars. Then they started talking. In Arabic. David's heart raced. Thanks to his training 15 years ago, he knew Arabic. Not perfect, but enough to understand. "Is everything ready?" one asked. "Yes, the materials are at the hotel. We'll pick them up tomorrow morning." "Will the target definitely be there?" "He's on the conference program. He'll speak at 1400. David tried not to take his eyes off the road, but his ears were completely focused on them. The conversation continued, and David was recording every word. The men were planning an operation. Tomorrow, in a conference hall, an important target. "What about the security system in the building?" asked the second man. "Old model, easy to bypass. Cameras are analog, recording time is limited. Escape route?" "We prepared 3 different options. The safest is the back exit through the service elevator." David was now certain without a doubt. These men were terrorists, and they were planning a major attack. The third man took out a file from his bag. David tried to see through the rearview mirror. Building plans, security schemes, photographs. "How many people will the target come with?" he asked. "At least 50 security, but the real problem is civilian participants. There will be 300 to 400 people. David's stomach churned. This wasn't just an assassination, it was a major massacre. 400 innocent people were in danger. "Are the explosives ready?" "Waiting at the hotel. There's enough to completely destroy the building." David gripped the steering wheel tightly. The anger he had suppressed for 15 years was slowly rising. They were approaching Rothschild Boulevard. There were 10 more minutes. David was thinking quickly. What were his options? He could report to the police. But these men were professionals. They would suspect, escape, carry out the plan elsewhere. Or they would kill David, silence him. Second option, follow them, learn where they would stay. But then they would access the materials, carry out the attack. There was a third option, the most dangerous, but most effective. Major Avi Goldstein inside David woke up. "Eliminate the threat at the source," he whispered to himself. Sayeret Matkal's first rule. He had made his decision. David suddenly turned right, left the main road. The men were surprised. "Where are you going?" one asked. "Shortcut," David said calmly. "Traffic is very heavy." But this wasn't true. David was taking them to a deserted area, industrial site, abandoned warehouses, a place where no one would be. The men had become uneasy. They began whispering in Arabic among themselves. "This isn't the right place. Where is the driver taking us?" David looked in the rearview mirror. It was a matter of moments before one of them reached for a gun. David stopped his taxi behind an abandoned warehouse. The surroundings were completely silent. The nearest main road was 500 meters away. "Gentlemen," David said, turning off the engine, "we need to talk." The men tensed. "What talk? Why did you bring us here?" David, with the key in his hand, slowly turned to the back. His face had completely changed. The 15-year-old tired taxi driver mask had disappeared. In its place came a cold, calculating, deadly look. "I heard your conversation," he said calmly. "I know Arabic. I know your attack plan for tomorrow." The men froze. They weren't expecting this. "Who are you?" asked the first man, reaching for his bag. David smiled. For the first time in 15 years, his real smile. "I used to be Major Avi Goldstein, Sayeret Matkal, and you made the biggest mistake of your lives." At that moment, everyone froze. Every terrorist who heard the name Sayeret Matkal would know, Israel's most deadly unit. "Impossible," said the second man. "You're just a taxi driver." "I have been for 15 years, said David. "But not today." The movement came very quickly. The moment David reached back, the first man tried to pull a gun from his bag. But David was faster. With his left hand, he caught the hand reaching for the gun. With his right hand, he twisted the man's wrist. The gun fell to the ground. At the same time the second man tried to attack, David repelled him with an elbow strike. 15 years of taxi driving hadn't erased 20 years of military training. Body memory, reflexes, combat instincts, they were all there. The third man tried to escape, but David had already unlocked the doors. The taxi had become a trap. "Sit down and be quiet," David said to the breathless men, "or you'll learn what a real Sayeret Matkal operation is like." The men were now afraid. What they saw in David's eyes was a hunter who had been sleeping for 15 years, and now he was awake. "Who sent you?" David asked. "This doesn't concern you." David gripped the first man's wrist a little tighter. "Sayeret Matkal interrogation techniques are very effective. I won't ask a second time." One of the men couldn't stand it and started talking. He told that they came from Gaza, belonged to a special Hamas cell, planned a major attack at tomorrow's conference attended by Israel's defense minister. David listened as his face darkened. 400 innocent people, just to kill one man. "Where are the explosives?" he asked. "At the hotel." "The small hotel on Ben Yehuda Street. How many more people are there?" "Just us 3, but there's a support team, 5 more people." David calculated. Total 8 terrorists, explosives, detailed plan. This was a major operation. He took out his phone, but he didn't call the police. He called a number he hadn't used for 15 years, kept for emergencies. "Operations desk," said the voice on the other end. "This is Goldstein." Code red. There was a long silence. "Goldstein, aren't you dead?" "Long story. I have 3 Hamas militants. They're planning a major attack tomorrow. Defense minister is the target." "Location?" David gave the coordinates. "Send a team here immediately and check the hotel on Ben Yehuda. We'll be there in 15 minutes. David hung up, looked at the men. "Congratulations. You just prevented the biggest terrorist attack in Israeli history." The Shin Bet team arrived 15 minutes later. Black SUVs, fully equipped agents. When David saw the team leader, he smiled. "Hello, Yoav." Yoav was shocked. "Avi? Are you real?" "I've been David Rosen for 15 years, but these men disrupted my plans." He handed over the terrorists. The documents in their bags were examined. Conference building plans, security details, explosive materials list. It really was a major attack plan. "The hotel on Ben Yehuda?" David asked. "Our team is there now. We caught 5 more people, found the explosives." David breathed a sigh of relief. The operation was complete. "Why did you come forward now?" Yoav asked. David looked at his taxi, then at his old friend. "Because some missions never end, Yoav. Even if you retire, when the homeland calls you, you answer." "Are you thinking of returning?" David shook his head. "No, I'm David Rosen now, but when Israel needs me, Avi Goldstein is always ready." Today, that yellow taxi is still driving through the streets of Tel Aviv. David Rosen is still behind the wheel, still quiet, still looking ordinary. But he's no longer just a driver. He's the city's secret protector, a silent guardian who has been patrolling the streets for 15 years.